Hello everyone, welcome to the Salem Witch Museum. We are honored tonight to have Marilynne Roach here to speak with us. Marilynne is a renowned author, a historian, and a presenter, and she's here to speak to us about one of the most intriguing, lingering mysteries, I think, at least one of the most gripping mysteries that come from the Salem Witch Trials. Marilynne Roach is an author. Her notable works are Six Women of Salem and the Chronicle of a Community, the day-by-day Chronicle of a Community Under Siege. Both of those books are available in our shop, and Marilynne will be doing a signing after if you want to have one signed by the author herself. She's also currently working on a very exciting project, which is Six Men of Salem, which we're all very excited about. Today, Marilynne is one of the most authoritative voices on the Salem Witch Trials, at least in our opinion. To quote our executive director, if Marilynne said it happened, and that is one of, I think, the most descriptive quotes, although she will contradict me on that point a little, I think. So as I said, we're thrilled to have her here with us today, speaking on a subject that presents such a particularly intriguing puzzle. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Marilynne.
Thank you. What I said before was that in my book, the Day-by-Day Chronicle, I said something which I am now rebutting now that I have further information. So you can't believe everything you read. But there are many Halloween tours of Morton Salem and print descriptions. It's got walking tours and websites that point to a particular spot where Sheriff George Corwin's house used to be, and imply or state outright that it is haunted because the current building, rather, is haunted because Corwin was or is still buried in the basement. Now, George Corwin was the Essex County Sheriff in 1692 during the witchcraft trials, and he has become something of a boogeyman, especially in modern novels and Halloween ghost tours. While never what you would call a sympathetic character for his role in the Salem tragedy, Corwin and his reputation has been painted more and more luridly in the 40-plus years I've been researching the trials. People ask writers where they get their ideas, and of course you get them from everywhere. But I can pinpoint the exact geographic location of where I was when I decided to reopen the case of Corwin's corpse. I was sipping coffee in Salem's Washington Street Dunkin' Donuts, and regarding this scenic view of historic downtown Salem, when I realized I was eye level with the basement of the house next door. The house next door is the Joshua Ward mansion built in the mid-1780s, after the first period home of Sheriff Corwin was demolished. Was I eye level with Sheriff Corwin's grave? So I had to look into the matter and find out more. You can see the Dunkin' Donuts clearly. The present building is an early Federalist-style brick mansion, and George Washington actually slept here in 1789 during his tour of New England. He is not said to have haunted it, however. When I was looking at the aforementioned view, the building was then the editorial headquarters of Higginson Book Company, publisher of historical and genealogical reprints. It is currently the Merchant, a boutique hotel. But if you Google the topic, and you'll find accounts of the basement burial and haunting on websites ranging from the Cold Spot to the FDIC. Here's the basic story. George Corwin's actions during the Salem Witch Trials earned him such enmity that when he died, Philip English, one of the witch suspects who escaped, took revenge by stealing Corwin's corpse. Said corpse, however, was also buried in the basement of Corwin's own house, either before, after, or instead of the theft. There are several variations on the basic theme. The whole population wanted revenge. Philip English specifically wanted revenge. English put a lien on the body to ensure payment of a debt. Or Corwin's family buried the body in the cellar to prevent its theft. English actually stole the body before the funeral and held it for ransom. English stole the body, which the family later buried in the cellar once they had ransomed it to prevent further seizures. Or English stole the body from the cellar, etc., 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 etc. Oh, wrong one. There's a lot of variations. So, according to the websites, the Corwin's ghost haunts the site still, or the ghost of his uncle, Judge Jonathan Corwin, he did not live there, and sometimes supposedly the ghost of which suspect Giles Corey, who did not live there either, along with assorted unnamed poltergeists. The FDIC's website offered less sensational, though not entirely accurate information in their brief notice of the Ward House, which once they had to foreclose on. According to the FDIC, the Higginson Books staff, when asked, did not think that they were haunted, but welcomed any past residents who might like to pay a visit. But first, who was George Corwin? As you can see, the name is spelled variously, even by the same person, even when they're Corwins. Sheriff George was a grandson of Captain George Corwin, a merchant who arrived in Salem in 1638. Captain George's eldest son, Captain John Corwin, was the father of our George. John's younger brother, Jonathan, became a judge involved in the witch trials, and it's his home that survives in Salem, saved and restored by Historic Salem Incorporated, now operated by the city as a tourist attraction. The younger George was a merchant like most of his family, and a captain in the militia like his father and grandfather before him. As such, he was part of the United Colonies' 1690 expedition against Canada. That's Quebec. The goal of the combined New York and New England assault was to end the fierce frontier attacks on English settlements by French courtiers du bois and their Wabanaki allies. The result, because of smallpox among the troops and several storms, was only an exchange of some captives, a good deal of taunting from the people of Quebec, and a crippling war debt. Winter storms hit the returning New England fleet, sank some of the ships, marooned others, and sent still more off course as far as the Caribbean. George survived. He returned to Salem to the small house he'd grown up in near the waterfront, the house that was now his after the deaths of his father and grandfather. Probate records for George's own estate later on would itemize one room downstairs, one room upstairs, plus a wash house. There may have been more, but we can assume a garret and a cellar with a dirt floor. And it doesn't sound like a very large dwelling from that, but we'll see. That's where it was, next to the now filled-in South River, the star with a circle on it. And the star to the upper left is Jonathan Corwin's house, which is still there, just to orient you. And as you can see, a lot of landfill has been going on. When the witch hunt began early in 1692, Massachusetts still had a provisional government operating between the armed rebellion against royal governor Sir Edmund Andros and whatever rule London saw fit to impose next. This turned out to be a new charter negotiated largely by Increase Mather, which arrived in May 1692 in the midst of the witch banning, and required Massachusetts to re-examine its laws and make sure none of it contradicted English common law. One of the readjustments was to replace the highest county law office of Marshal, a post held in Essex County by Salem upholsterer George Herrick, who was responsible for the earliest arrests when the witch accusations began, and replace that with the office of sheriff. The legislature appointed 25-year-old George Corwin sheriff for Essex County, with Herrick continuing as under-sheriff. Family connections probably helped George gain the post. Yes. His father-in-law was Bartholomew Gedney. His paternal uncle was Jonathan Corwin, and his maternal uncle was Waitstill Winthrop, and all of them would be judges on the witchcraft court. As sheriff, George Corwin was responsible, with the help of the undersheriff, a pool of local constables and various men roped in as needed for deputies to make arrests, deliver suspects to the local magistrates for questioning, deliver them to the two county jails in Ipswich and Salem, seeing that prisoners were transferred to and from the jail at Boston, calling coroner's juries in case of suspicious deaths, and confiscating the goods of various parties who had forfeited them, as well as overseeing the hangings of the unfortunates convicted of witchcraft. Under the old charter, the one that was just replaced, the assistants, which is the governor's council, had served as a higher court so that previous capital cases like witchcraft had been conducted in Boston, as were any resulting executions. However, the 1692 sale was not only unexpectedly extensive, it occurred while the Massachusetts government was reorganizing itself. The jails were packed with prisoners. There was no regular superior court founded yet. Consequently, a special court was appointed to handle these cases, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, meaning to hear and to determine. Temporary courts like this were legal in England and New England to handle all manner of crimes when the cases could not wait until the next scheduled quarterly sitting. The court convened in Salem, the Essex County seat, and closer to the crowd of witnesses, instead of in Boston. Therefore, people condemned at the witch trials that year were hanged in Salem, not Boston, and Essex County Sheriff George Corwin was in charge of it. The hangings were the worst part for the families involved, but the confiscations were bad enough. When Sheriff Corwin showed up to seize the goods of a convicted prisoner and some that hadn't been convicted yet, this rankled and festered even when the prisoners survived the courts. The survivors' kin, descendants, and generations of historians have hashed over whether or not Corwin's actions were legal and whether or not he was simply lining his own pockets. In either case, he was certainly thorough. According to Robert Taft, a contemporary, this is what happened at the Proctor household. John Proctor and his wife being in prison, the sheriff came to his house and seized all the goods, provisions, and cattle that he could come at, and sold some of the cattle at half price, killed others, put them up for the West Indies, threw the beer out of the barrel, carried away the barrel, emptied a pot of broth, and took away the pot, and left nothing in the house for the support of the children. No part of the said goods were known to be returned. The youngest child was a toddler, but the eldest child was 34 years old, actually. While the government was reorganizing throughout the rest of 92 and 93, earlier laws were declared to be enforced temporarily, since we could hardly do without laws at the best of times, and these were not the best of times. While the new charter allowed a good deal of local say in the matter, England required and demanded that local laws be either repugnant or contrary to the laws of this our realm of England. The legislature was understandably nervous walking a tightrope between laws that evolved during Massachusetts history that England could object to and new requirements the local populace might resist. Some of these involved confiscation of property from convicted felons, and witchcraft was the felony. Witchcraft itself was illegal in both Old and New England, so that part wasn't a problem for them. Massachusetts law did not confiscate any convicted felon's property, but English common law did. Under medieval feudalism, convicted felons' goods and chattels, his personal estate, were forfeit to the king upon conviction. New England, however, got rid of all this. Massachusetts' 1641 Body of Liberty stated, "All our lands and heritages shall be free from all usury and waste, escheats and forfeitures upon the deaths of parents or ancestors." The same laws also specified that all condemned persons retained full power to make wills and testaments and other lawful alienations of their lands and estates. Massachusetts law protected, even people convicted of witchcraft charges. Anne Hibbins, for example, a wealthy Boston widow hanged in 1656, first disposed of her real estate and personal property by a will that was, after her execution, duly honored. And this is a copy of a deed where her grown son in Ireland is referring to an exchange of land that he inherited from his late mother, and he doesn't say how she came to be late. In addition, more recent English law limited confiscations to chattels alone in cases of witchcraft. King James I's witchcraft statutes, of all things, King James was down on witches, preserved the widow's dower and the heir's inheritance. Goods and chattels, movable possessions, could be taken, but not land. The idea that people accused their neighbors of witchcraft in 92 in order to get their lands, beloved of many popular accounts of the trial, is actually false. Goods were definitely confiscated in 1692, because that was not repugnant to English common law. They were actually agents from England roaming the area looking for violations, and the government didn't know if the charter was going to be revoked again. But the witch trials didn't seem to bother the agents at all. They were more interested in getting the import and export taxes and going after smugglers. So on June 15, 1692, while the government slowly implemented the new charter, began to rewrite the province's laws, the General Court reconfirmed all the old Massachusetts laws temporarily, neither repugnant to the laws of England nor inconsistent with the new charter. So, the temporary court of Oyer and Terminer is going to operate according to the law and custom of England and of Massachusetts province. So, how much that differed remained undefined. And with the confusion of laws, Sheriff George Corwin and his men proceeded against the accused during the summer and fall of 1692. One task was to prevent a felon's family from hiding or selling the chattels before the government could take their share, or take possession of them for safety. The sheriff was to inventory and appraise the goods and require sureties against their embezzlement, the technical term that they used. If the accused or the family could not do this, the sheriff was to take custody of the goods and deliver them to the town. Supposedly, the accused would get them back if found not guilty. Besides a guilty verdict by a trial, jury, or confession, there were other situations that called for confiscations. By the accused standing mute, as Giles Corey did, and by outlawry declared when a suspect escaped from jail, and there were quite a few jailbreaks, actually. After Edward and Sarah Bishop broke out of Salem jail in October 1692, Corwin showed up to seize the bishop's 6 cows, 24 swine, 46 sheep, and various household goods to the value of £10. One of the bishop's grown sons managed to borrow the sum to offer a surety, so none of the above was impounded. Sheriff Corwin wrote out and signed a receipt to this effect, and that's what is printing in the book. Thank you. The case that would give Corwin the most trouble involved the richest couple in Salem, Philip and Mary English. First Mistress English was accused when her specter was reported among the witches. Corwin or his officers arrested her in April, arriving, according to English family law, in the middle of the night. The star on the right is the location of the English house, and the one on the left is Sheriff George's house. Family law also asserted that she made them wait until morning, and wait again until she got dressed, and made them wait until she had breakfast, while Philip paced the floor in a fury. Soon after, Mary was questioned and held for trial. The bewitched girls reported Philip's angry specter going after them as well, and the law issued an arrest warrant for him as well on April 30th. Forewarned, English fled to the home of a Boston business associate, George Hollard, out of Corwin's jurisdiction in Suffolk County. 2 more warrants of the 2nd and 6th of May led to a search of Hollard's North End house, when the Boston constables looked everywhere except under the pile of dirty laundry where Philip was hiding. This episode was not preserved in family law, but there's contemporary accounts of it. He eluded the law for about a month until he was brought back to Essex County and questioned May 31st in Salem Village. Both he and his wife were transferred to Boston, where Philip posted a £4,000 sterling bond, which is a huge amount of money, so they could occupy better quarters in the home of jailer John Arnold. By late August, as the time for their trials neared, friends arranged for their escape. Family tradition would describe Philip bravely declaring that the law dared not touch him. Of course, he's in jail while he declares this, so the law already has. But Mary and the Reverends Samuel Willard and Joshua Moody persuade them to leave. Philip and Mary slip away from the Sunday before their trials around August 21st with letters of introduction to Governor Benjamin Fletcher of New York. With both Philip and Mary now fugitives, Philip's £4,000 bond was forfeit. He may have been declared an outlaw as well. The controversy is over whether Corwin followed the proper procedure for the various fugitives. In any case, Sheriff George Corwin confiscated, according to English's own estimate, 1,183 pounds 2 shillings worth of goods from English's home, shop, wharves, and warehouses. There's furniture, plate, and wine, dry goods, ready-made shoes, 3 gross of thimbles, lumber, clavets, cod, grain, and fishing gear. Family law, recorded a century later by diarist Reverend William Bentley, added ships and sheep to the losses, and said the officers were 6 weeks conveying goods from his stores. Once the law left, driving 6 swine and a bob-tailed cow from the mansion yard, several neighbors helped themselves to the remainder. So, just who was Philip English? His name, too, was spelled various ways. But it was actually something like Philippe Langlois, because he was from the Isle of Jersey, spoke French as his first language, and kept many of his business accounts in French. He came to Salem around 1674, not as the poor disinherited lad of later legend, but already in command of several trading vessels. He continued to maintain good commercial and family ties with Jersey, establishing himself in Salem as a business associate of merchant William Hollingsworth, and later, after Hollingsworth was lost at sea, married William's daughter, Mary. Thank you. Jersey is one of the Channel Islands, but is a British territory, even though it's close to France. Up the upper right, you see the edge of France, but there are the islands, Alderney, Guernsey, Sark, and down at the bottom, Jersey. All of them having cows associated with them, by the way. It's, let's see, French is the native language there, and the code of laws is very different from English common law. Philip English was by no means the only immigrant from Jersey, for eastern Massachusetts had a noticeable enclave of these foreigners. Although many in Salem anglicized their names, they commonly spoke a foreign language, and some showed scant respect as the locals thought for Massachusetts law and custom. The locals also doubted how far they could be trusted, so this was a time when French-Canadian forces were at war with New England on the frontier, and King Louis XIV did have definite plans to acquire Britain's New World territories. Although Jersey folk were Protestant, not Catholic, they were Anglican rather than any of the Puritan denominations. This did not prevent Philip English from having the grants pew in the Salem Meeting House, however. Forward one. Forward. Yes. That's it. Thank you. They were also largely royalists. New England's royal governor Andros, the one they arrested and sent back to England without authority, he was long associated with the Channel Isle of Guernsey, where his family came from, and he had encouraged Jersey emigration specifically to counteract the Puritan settlers' influence. Philip English also helped others emigrate from Jersey, many as bondservants, with most of the men working for him as mariners and the women as domestics in Salem and Marblehead. Forward. Thanks. Some Salem Jerseymen worked alternately in Jersey and in New England, making tax collection difficult. And when Philip English took his turn as a constable in Salem, he simply did not bother to collect taxes from his men, although their families still resided in Salem. Jersey folk were also not quick to comply with the laws of the place they had moved to, preferring Jersey law, a combination of ancient Norman custom and French law. Thomas Baker of Ipswich, he's anglicized his name, was served with a warrant in 1679 and refused it, saying he did not care for all the laws in this country. Told to be brought before Major William Hawthorne for that, he scoffed he would not be tried by that white hat limping rogue. Think again. One difference between Jersey and English law that would later concern Corwin was that in Jersey a creditor could not collect from a bankrupt estate unless he assumed the whole estate, debts and all, which was expensive. Therefore, Jersey merchants were quick to sue before a debtor thus escaped. Early New Englanders held quarterly courts and had the reputation of being litigious. On Jersey, there was a weekly Saturday court just for the creditors. So, Philip English was quick to foreclose and quick to sue even when the debtor thought he had already made arrangements to pay the debt. To be fair, he sued not just non-Jersey locals, but fellow Jerseymen and his own father-in-law's estate. He made sure debtor and fellow Jerseyman Benjamin Mashley was jailed, to the latter's fury, the Benjamin sisters' passage to New England. Business transactions with English gave people nightmares they later interpreted as visions. Thank you. As the richest man in Salem, English built a many-gabled mansion known for generations as English's Great House, an oak-timbered, brick-built frame covered by carpets without and plastered within. Even the cellar rooms were finished with stone floors, plaster ceilings, great hob, and bake ovens. The house had, among other amenities, pantries, a counting house, a shop, a sundial over the southern door, and 2-foot-high roof ornaments atop the gables. Later generations of heirs divided the house into 2 units, and as weathering facade gables fell into disrepair, replaced them with rows of small dormers in the large attic story, so that locals called the place the 40-peaked house, which is several more than the 7 gables. Diarist Reverend William Bentley noted in 1802 that the place was still sound, but after hard use as rental property and standing empty, it was demolished in 1833. As they destroyed it, workmen discovered a secret garret room they presumed to have been built as temporary concealment in case of another outbreak of witch accusations. And that's the location of the house, once more. And that's the streets nowadays. It's still near Collins Cove. One more. And that's looking down Essex Street towards Collins Cove. And the gray house with the 2 porches, 2 stories with porches, is in the approximate location where the house used to be. One more. Thank you. So, early in 1693, Philip English is back, and he petitions Governor Phipps, accusing Sheriff Corwin of illegally seizing goods, chattels, and merchandise from him and other defendants the summer before. Now he wants Corwin to produce an inventory and bring it before the governor. Phipps did issue the order, and Corwin did appear before him on March 6, in 93, when he promised that the goods would be returned to English on demand. When this did not happen, Phipps issued another order on April 26 for the return of all the goods in full quality and quantity. In 1802, William Bentley saw a curious paper owned by English's descendants, which contained a list of the articles taken from the house of Philip English by Sheriff Corwin when English and his wife were taken for witchcraft, said Bentley. Was this Corwin's required inventory? English later submitted a detailed list, which is what that is, but returning the goods was easier said than done. Philip and Mary had come back to Salem in 93 to find the house and warehouses stripped by the law and the neighbors. According to their descendants, only a hogshead of malt escaped, which being covered accidentally with shavings by the carpenters, the officers were deceived as to its value. Even the family portraits were gone, they said. Philip set about suing his light-fingered neighbors and suing Sheriff Corwin for the return of his goods. It's unclear what Corwin returned or how much, despite Phipps's orders. English himself said that much of what was taken had been squandered away to a great value, and much of my provisions used to subsist a numerous company of prisoners. The frontier war had nearly emptied the treasury. If, besides using confiscated goods to feed the many prisoners, the government had also dipped into them to provide back pay for the officers, this would have further complicated the matter of legality. We don't really know what happened. But English's lawsuits dragged on for years, all the way to the Superior Court. There in May of 1694, with former Oyer Terminator Judge William Stoughton presiding, the court determined that Corwin had been acting according to the law, and that he and his heirs should be held exempt from any liability relating to his actions in 1692. English would not have any of that. In February of 96, he sued Corwin specifically for the return of a certain cow with a bobbed tail, dark-colored, and 5 swine, viz., a large sow and 4 shoats, that Corwin, or others employed by him, had taken from or near about the dwelling house of said English without English's leave or license sometime in August 92, and doth yet detain the same, though demand hath been made for him. After 1692, the government owed Corwin £67, 6 shillings, 4 pence in back pay. Possibly the livestock was some of that, but under the circumstances, it was not wise to keep the animals. By now, Corwin was no longer sheriff, and he was no longer in good health either. On February 26, 1697, the day Corwin turned 30, Constable John Woodwell made his way through the deep snow that had fallen the day before to present Corwin with a writ requiring him to appear at the May Quarterly Court and answer Philip English's latest suit. The constable required Corwin post a £15 bond as his promise to appear. However, Corwin lacked either cash or goods enough to cover the bond, so the constable was obliged to arrest him to make sure he appeared in court. Forward. Constable John Woodwell's return to the arrest warrant stated, "I have, for want of the goods, seized the body of the within-mentioned Captain George Corwin and delivered or committed him to Nathaniel Sharp of Salem, the jail-keeper," all of which must have warmed the heart of Philip English. Presumably one of Corwin's relatives stood bail, for Corwin appears to have been back home on April 12th when he died during a spring snowstorm, leaving his widow and a 4-year-old son. Snow began early that day, covered ground and houses by noon, and froze 7-inch-long icicles by 5 o'clock. The snow wouldn't melt for 3 days, and we're left wondering what happened next during those 3 days. The Corwin family tomb was in a pasture behind George's home, no great distance. Could Philip English have intercepted the body between the house and the tomb? Or did he just threaten to do so, leaving the bereaved family to bury the body temporarily in an earth-floored cellar? Partly because the whole matter sounded so bizarre, and because diarist Samuel Sewell, who mentioned the 7-inch-long icicle, did not mention any such event, I assume the constable's statement that he seized the body of meant habeas corpus, which means to have the body of, and it was later mistaken to mean seized the dead body of, and that therefore I had debunked the whole story as nonsense in my book, The Salem Witch Trials. I demolished it, I jumped up and down on its grave, but pride goeth before a fall. Thank you. Then I saw a link online to this, an entry in the parish register for Alston Fields, Staffordshire, England. 1659, August 30th, Humphrey Bacon buried about 2 o'clock in the night, fearing an arrest. An arrest for debt despite the debtor's decease. This gave me pause. Could something like that have happened here in New England? So I had to look into the matter and ask myself just what did happen. Searching online some more, I found an 1874 issue of the British publication Notes and Queries. Citing a Derbyshire Times issue, it related the tale of one Thomas Clay of North Winfield in Derbyshire, a man of intemperate habits. Clay died in 1794 after amassing a 20-pound bar tab. Clay's parents had to keep their doors locked until the funeral because the son's creditor, Adlington the publican, threatened to seize the son's body unless they paid the son's tab. As soon as the parents unlocked the door for the funeral, Adlington forced his way into their home, seized the dead body, and placed it on a bench in front of his pub across the street in full view of the public and the bereaved parents. As shocking as this was, none of the family offered to pay the debt. Adlington's plan backfired. After several days, he had to bury it, but he used an old bacon chest instead of a coffin. And it turns out that the bodies of British playwright Richard Brinsley Sheridan and poet Thomas Dryden were also arrested for debt after their deaths, although their friends produced the ransom and the funeral cortege proceeded even though delayed. But was impounding a body ever done in New England? Late in 1692, when elderly witch suspect Anne Foster died in prison of natural causes, like lack of sanitation, the jailer refused to release the body to her sons until they paid £2 10 shillings, plus £4 for provisions and other expenses, because prisoners had to pay for their room and board as well as court fees. This isn't the same as taking the corpse, but it's a little closer. A similar fate befell the ashes of George W. G. Ferris, inventor of the Ferris wheel, who died in 1896, indebted to a funeral home in Pittsburgh. His ashes remained in storage for a year until the bill was paid. This is not the same as arresting a body for debts contracted before death, but the circumstances still happen today. YouTube had footage of a Kenyan funeral home's staff repossessing a corpse from the grave during the funeral in 2017. Searching further, I found an 1862 issue of the Upper Canada Law Journal and Municipal and Local Courts Gazette, thank goodness for Google, with an article on vulgar legal errors, vulgar here meaning common. These included the false notion that a creditor has the power of preventing the burial of a corpse by arresting the body for death, which is not only revolting to the feelings of humanity, but is contrary to every principle of law. Oh yes, and the arrow pointed to a Massachusetts case that they referred to. A prosecution at common law for the offense was sustained in the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts before Chief Justice Parsons at Nisi Prius, in which there was a conviction and the parties punished by a fine, Commonwealth versus Snow in the county of Barnstable. The body of a man was arrested by a civil process on its way to the burying place, the party proceeding on a mistaken notion that he was entitled to the body of his debtor after death. And here is Justice Parsons. I have not yet located the papers for this case, but Constable Snow served in Harwich on Cape Cod, and the justice was Theophilus Parsons, who was Chief Justice from 1806 to 1813, long after Philip English's time. I have not found the papers, as I say, and I recently learned that shortly after this time period, the courthouse burned down, so I'm not sure what's there, but I'm still looking. According to the same Canadian Journal, it is enacted by the General Statutes of Massachusetts that if a sheriff, deputy sheriff, coroner, or constable takes the body of any deceased person on any process or execution, he shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $500 or imprisonment in the jail not exceeding 6 months. General Statutes, General Chapter 165, Section 36. Do not try this at home. And the law is still on the books, although it has a different number. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 272, Section 70. So now you know, and you know better. But oddly, the penalty is the same and does not allow for inflation, which can only lead to encouraging this practice. So, I now strongly suspect that English at least threatened to take George Corwin's body, and the family could have buried it in the cellar until matters resolved. English was always a determined debt collector, angry enough and known to hold grudges. One branch of his descendants repeated the story that on his deathbed, when encouraged to forgive his enemies like a good Christian before meeting his Maker, he grudgingly agreed and then counted, "But if I get well, I'll be damned if I forgive him." English certainly did not spare the bereaved family. As he later told the province's reparations committee, "I never received any other or further satisfaction for the goods than £60 3 shillings paid me by the administrators of George Corwin, late sheriff deceased. The widowed Lydia Corwin paid this in silver plate and linens, according to English's descendants, who preserved them for generations as trophies and trotted them out to show guests when they came." Corwin's estate was not settled until after his widow died a few years later in 1700, when their son Bartholomew was 7 years old. The estate then was inventoried at £73 8 shillings 4 pence, plus outstanding debts of £33 17 shillings 3 pence, and English had been paid £60 3 shillings. English continued to petition the legislature for restitution. His list to the reparations committee in 1711 included 6 swine sold for £2 and 1 cow worth £2 10 shillings. Were these the swine and the bob-tailed cow Corwin had, or others? Every answer raises more questions. Okay. So this is the wider view with the blue star showing about where the tomb was. And this is the approximate location now of where the tomb was. There is a different convenience store in the little strip mall, and there is now a tattoo parlor should you need that sort of thing. Okay. Wherever Corwin was first buried, his body was eventually placed in the family tomb behind his house. In 1773, the Corwin lot containing the tomb was sold for development, and the bodies were moved to the nearby Broad Street burying ground. And here's a bucolic view of the Broad Street burying ground. Here, a modest stump-like obelisk marks the family plot. Its inscription on 3 sides, now nearly illegible, mainly honors the progenitor, Captain George, and his second wife, with Sheriff George included anonymously under many of their descendants. And so we leave George Corwin to rest in peace with his kin, and a flurry of sunspots or wandering spirit orbs, as you prefer. And